She delivered the invitation as if it were a duty she was delegating to me. It wasn't a date or an evening out together, it was a job. "The company is hosting a dinner at the Langham Hotel downtown this coming Friday," Camille stated without looking away from her laptop. "I need you there." I placed my coffee aside. "You require my presence?" She eventually looked at me. "As it's for partners and spouses, it would be odd if I attended alone." She then directed her gaze back to the screen. "Please just don't disgrace me, Miles. These are significant individuals." That was all. "No, I'd be happy for you to join. No, it promises to be an enjoyable evening out. Just don't embarrass me." I agreed. Naturally, I agreed. After all, that's what I had been doing for the majority of 6 years, agreeing, remaining silent, making myself adjustable to suit whatever form Camille needed in that specific instant. What I didn't realize, what I couldn't have foreseen, was that Friday night would alter everything. The encounter wasn't due to anything I did, but rather who entered through those doors. And upon her arrival, she didn't cast her gaze on the room filled with directors, vice presidents, and senior managers who had been vying for her attention for weeks. She bypassed everyone, including Camille, and the table of executives eager to greet her. She made a beeline straight towards me. With 4 words, she caused Camille's champagne glass to slip from her hands and shatter on the marble floor of the Langham Hotel. Prior to proceeding, if you're new here, please subscribe and share where you're tuning in from, as the events unfolding will significantly impact Miles DeVero, a 47-year-old resident of Chicago, Illinois, who has spent 12 years working as a structural engineer in a city that can easily consume you if you let it. I engineered support structures for towering skyscrapers, the unseen design that prevents them from collapsing inward. Exceptionally skilled at this field, I grasped the intricacies of forces and pressures, appreciating how an exterior facade could mask internal stresses of great magnitude. Over a decade ago, I left this career under unexplained circumstances to the few who know my present-day life. My brother, father, and Camille are among those unaware, as well as the residents in our Lincoln Park neighborhood, parents at school fundraisers that Camille drags me to, and the couple we occasionally dine with due to Camille's opinion of their usefulness. They perceive me as a man performing home-based freelance consulting projects, dealing with contract work. Nothing ostentatious, nothing requiring professional titles or business cards. Conversations about my work are avoided, neither initiated nor encouraged by Camille. I long ago ceased offering explanations. Unknown to them, I departed from structural engineering due to an unsettling discovery concerning a project I was the lead engineer on. It was about unauthorized and unbeknownst decisions made higher up the chain, which had significant implications for the project. When I presented my findings to the firm's partners, they offered me a hush-money settlement, a non-disclosure agreement, and essentially ended my career overnight. I accepted the offer, signed the documents, and moved on, but not without spending the following 12 years seeking my identity, as engineering was the only thing that had ever given me certainty. I encountered Camille 18 months post-departure. She was astute, polished, adept at reading a room's social dynamics and wielding influence. Her abilities captivated me, even attracted me. For Camille, every individual occupied a rank within each social setting, and her focus was solely on ascending this hierarchy. This inclusively applied to me. At first, I met her expectations. I was well-educated, presentable, financially stable from the settlement, not burdensome. I didn't demand much or cause disturbances. In Camille's unique categorization of people, I was useful. We married 4 years into our relationship, the wedding held at the Drake Hotel on Michigan Avenue with 300 guests and a lavish dinner that exceeded many people's yearly income. Camille meticulously arranged every detail. On my part, I adhered to her chosen attire and uttered the appropriate words during our nuptials. However, it is unclear when the dynamics between us started to change. These transformations rarely occur at a single point in time. Over time, numerous small instances accumulate where you justify each one independently until a day comes when you find yourself in your own kitchen, and your spouse addresses you as if to an overly slow parking attendant. In this moment, it hits you that you can't recall the last question she asked you that wasn't logistical. By the company dinner, I had been unnoticed for years. This was not the case with everyone. Not with my brother Derek, who phoned every Sunday and truly cared about my well-being. Not with Mrs. Ockhaffer, our elderly neighbor, who supplied me with tomatoes from her garden in summer and whose furnace I'd fixed 2 winters ago. Yet to Camille, to the life she built, I was a mere prop. A well-dressed, submissively obedient prop she only used when societal norms demanded a spouse. Located on North Wacker Drive, the Langham Hotel exudes an ambience that subtly instills a sense of personal value. High ceilings and golden, intentional lighting create an atmosphere that suggests affluence without overtly stating it. Each surface seems to whisper wealth. 8 months prior, Camille ascended to the position of Regional Vice President of Business Development at her consulting firm, Ashford Meridian Group, a promotion marked by a parking space, salary increase, and a novel echelon of individuals to impress. The Friday dinner was intended as a welcoming gesture for the incoming CEO, an external appointee who had sparked equal amounts of excitement and trepidation among senior leadership for weeks. The specifics were deliberately elusive, but it was understood that she was renowned for her ability to bring about change. The companies Camille visited were different upon departure, and she preferred an informal dinner instead of a formal introduction on her first workday. En route, Camille briefed me on the guidelines. Don't initiate conversations, she advised, adjusting her lipstick in the visor mirror. Mention you're an independent consultant, but avoid details. Understood. Stay close, but not too near. If there's a group, stay slightly behind them. They don't need to manage me. I focused on Lakeshore Drive. The skyline glowed against the October night. Ann Miles, she finished, closing the mirror. If I'm talking, don't interject. Don't be charismatic. Just be attentive and silent. I glanced at her for a moment. You want me to attend a dinner, but not talk. Please avoid putting me in an unfavorable light, she said, a phrase that had become so familiar it no longer startled me. It's as if my presence in any setting is a problem to be dealt with, as though the greatest asset I have to offer is my silence. I responded, understood. She turned towards the window, thank you. The dinner was set up in the Langhams' private event area, a room boasting floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a view of the Chicago River and the city lights reflected on its dark waters below. Round tables were adorned with white linens and low arrangements of white flowers. Around 60 people attended, including senior partners, regional directors, and some major clients of the firm. Camille navigated the room effortlessly, her natural ability evident in her confident handshakes, calculated laughs, and skillful maneuvering to include or exclude individuals from conversations based on quick mental calculations. She exhibited remarkable proficiency in this area, which was never up for debate. I maintained an appropriate distance, slightly behind, silent, a well-dressed piece of furniture. A man named Trevor, who appeared to be one of the senior partners, approached me at some point when Camille was engaged elsewhere across the room. He was roughly 55, flushed from alcohol, and typically interesting men were very dull. It seems you're Camille's husband, he commented. What line of work are you in? I replied, independent consulting, focusing on infrastructure and systems. He merely nodded indifferently when someone isn't listening. Camille is exceptional, an invaluable asset to the firm. You must be proud, he added. I am, was my response. He departed. I grabbed a glass of water from a passing tray and settled near the windows where I could view the river without inconveniencing anyone. I had stood there for about 10 minutes when the atmosphere in the room shifted suddenly. It's a distinct alteration. One can recognize the arrival of significance without a direct glimpse. A subtle shift in sound, heads turning synchronously, a wave-like progression of postures throughout a room, all signs that an important figure has arrived. I didn't swivel around promptly. Instead, I observed from the glass window reflections as the crowd near the entrance subtly dispersed, Camille's gaze deviating from her discussion, the senior partners advancing decisively towards the door. Upon turning around, the world momentarily halted. The name echoing in my mind was Nora Callahan. Her visage was familiar, not due to constant observation, but because it had become a part of my consciousness over time, fading from noticeable to instinctive. Nora Callahan, 44 years old, with shorter hair than I recall, maintaining the same precise stance, erect yet flexible, like a balanced structure aware of its own weight's location. For a decade and a half, I hadn't crossed paths with her. In that moment, she was surveying the room, much like one does when entering a space for the first time, assessing it swiftly. Exits, groupings, vibrancy, interactions, aspects she had been doing since our initial encounter on the Alderman Street building project in the East Loop, where she presented herself as the junior safety compliance officer assigned to our firm. We collaborated for 3 years, a period marked by early mornings and late nights, tackling issues that seemed unsolvable until they were, fostering a unique camaraderie born from constructing together, knowing we were both instrumental in its existence. Then came my discovery, and I shared it with the partners truthfully. Nora, who had approached me 2 weeks prior to that meeting with the same evidence I'd collected, who urged, "Miles, this needs reporting." It's not acceptable to ignore this situation. Nora had significantly contributed to constructing our case together. We were both dismissed unjustly. She suffered greater losses. She had fewer resources to fall back on. She had a 5-year-old daughter, an unbreakable lease, and a damaged reputation in the industry that they secretly and systematically ruined in ways designed to be untraceable. I complied with my NDA, accepted my settlement, and essentially disappeared. Nora stood her ground. Over the years, I managed to gather bits of information about her, knowing she was still active. I knew she had rebuilt her life. I was unaware of the extent to which she had established something new on her own. When our eyes met in the room, it wasn't like scenes from movies. There was no pause, no change in music, no slow-motion effect. It was a more straightforward and heartbreaking event than that. She halted. For a brief moment, amid 60 individuals vying for her focus, Nora Callahan paused, and I noticed an expression pass over her face. Recognition, certainly, but also something deeper, something that seemed like relief before she resumed her motion. Instead of heading towards Camille, who was poised to make the initial impact near the entrance, or Trevor, engaged in a conversation about Nora's past work record, or the group of senior partners forming a semicircle of professional greeting, she walked straight through them all, unwaveringly. She stood in front of me, her eyes gleaming excessively, hinting at something she was concealing through sheer determination. This same resilience I'd observed helping her overcome circumstances that should have shattered her. "Miles," she whispered, followed by a quavering voice, barely maintaining its composure, "I've never ceased my search for you." The distinct sound of crystal on marble, Nora's shattered champagne glass echoed from behind her. For roughly 30 seconds that seemed to reorganize the last 15 years, Nora and I remained rooted in the center of that room. I uttered her name, taking extra care, as if handling a delicate object previously thought lost. "Why are you here?" I queried, already aware of the response. Just a brief moment before the response solidified into reality was needed. "It seems," she clarified, "I now manage this company." Despite Camille being 6 feet away, frozen stiff, and the room filled with 60 sets of eyes, she chuckled, a genuine small laugh. "Come find me in 10 minutes, she whispered. "There's a balcony off the east corridor. I need to know everything." And just like that, she transformed, standing tall, facing the room once more, now embodying the CEO, composed and intimidating, the self they all aspired to impress. I remained rooted in place, taking deep breaths. In about 45 seconds, Camille was by my side. "How do you know her?" Her voice was icy, concealing her real feelings. "We used to work together," I replied. "You still do." She eyed me skeptically, much like she did unapproved expenses. "You were a consultant. She's the CEO of a national firm." I wasn't always a consultant, though. This unspoken discussion, 12 years in the making, unfolded abruptly within a hotel ballroom on the Chicago River. Camille's gaze locked with mine, and I saw her calculating, not emotionally, but socially. She was figuring out what this sudden revelation meant for her, her status, and the image she had so diligently crafted throughout the evening. I instructed Miles, "Work the room," in a tone that held neither animosity nor frustration, just the unwavering assurance of a man who'd found his footing at last. I departed, leaving Camille standing alone, and made my way toward the eastern corridor. The Langhams' balcony faces north along the river. Despite October's chill in Chicago, we didn't speak of it. We stood side by side against the railing as the city carried on obliviously below us, immense, indifferent, and stunning. 3 years ago, Nora hired a private investigator to locate you. However, he found nothing, and she assumed you had moved or changed your identity. "I was here," you said, implying that she was incorrect in her assumption. She questioned why you hadn't contacted her before, to which you responded by mentioning the NDA non-disclosure agreement. With a patient but not gentle tone, she informed you that she had successfully overcome both the NDA and the subsequent settlement. You admitted that you did not receive any related documentation for 2 years. She inquired about who handled your legal affairs, to which you hesitated, recalling the law firm, the assigned attorney, and the paperwork you had signed and filed without further thought. A man named Patterson from the firm's legal team was responsible for her legal matters, not yours. Nora briefly closed her eyes in response. They assigned their lawyer to you and stated he was working for your benefit. After processing this information, I realized it implied a larger than anticipated settlement, a portion of which should have been yours. I don't know where the money went, but I do know you didn't receive it. I attempted to locate you to inform you about this. We stood in the October wind, gazing at the river. For 15 years, I watched as you shrank yourself. You signed agreements, buried them, and rebuilt from scratch in a new direction. Your life had narrowed to revolving around someone who no longer acknowledged your presence, yet there was always a connection, one I maintained on my end. "Update me on your activities," she requested. So I shared everything with her: the misleading settlement, the consulting jobs, and the marriage. For 12 years, she had transformed into a figure who made brief appearances at corporate functions and stood slightly in the background. She listened attentively, as was her habit, without interjecting, carefully storing information away. After a pause, she spoke up. "I constructed something." "It took years," she admitted, "during which I lost several things that I won't detail now as we'd be here all night. But I built it." She looked me straight in the eye. "The first significant acquisition I made with real capital, the company I acquired to gain my current standing, was founded upon the technical documentation you submitted. The report you filed before they muzzled you was instrumental in a judge ruling negligence. I didn't realize that at the time. I believe you were unaware as well. I attempted to inform you." She turned her gaze back to the river. "Miles, your act of courage sitting before those men and telling the truth despite losing everything, I never forgot it. I've consistently felt angry on your behalf since you were unfairly burdened for doing the right thing." This left me bewildered. For 12 years, I'd been grappling with the concept of what I'd lost, reflecting little on my actions that held value. "What's next?" I inquired. "Now," Nora replied, "you share all you know about infrastructure consulting, as I oversee 17 active projects in the Midwest and require someone I can rely upon completely." She paused. "Also, consider what your life truly should encompass, since everything you've shared suggests that no one has posed this question to you in a considerable while." She was correct. No one had, not even me. After 20 minutes, we returned indoors. The dinner persisted without us. The partners reconvened. The dialogue resumed. The social dance readjusted itself around our absence. Upon my return through the corridor, Camille immediately approached me, her expression suggesting she had been engrossed in mental computations for some time. "We need to discuss something," she stated. I concurred. "Indeed, we do." She guided me towards a quieter area close to the bar. "Who is Nora Callahan? What's this about?" I inquired. "She was my coworker. 15 years ago, we discovered significant safety breaches at the company where I worked. We both reported them, and as a result, we were both terminated. Nora fought the decision. I chose to settle. She went on to establish her own national consulting firm. Now it appears she's set to become the CEO of your company." Camille regarded me intently. "Were you a structural engineer?" I confirmed. "Yes." "You led me to believe you had always been a consultant," she clarified. "I never asked about your past work. I assumed that you had always been a consultant," I explained. "You allowed me to take responsibility for it, and I acknowledged that my actions contributed to the situation. I had become so adaptable that I suppressed parts of myself that didn't fit your image of me." "Why didn't you share this with me?" you inquired. "I attempted to discuss the past, but you always steered the discussion towards current topics such as the dinner party, the budget, or whatever you required from me at that moment. Each time I spoke, I maintained a calm tone. You had no interest in the person I was before we met, Camille. Rather, you were intrigued by the role I played in your life." You hesitated, then started to speak. "That's not," you began. "You extended an invitation for tonight and requested that I avoid embarrassing you," I stated. "You placed me 3 feet behind you and instructed me to be silent. That is what our marriage resembles at present." The music in the room drifted, a slow and orchestrated backdrop for people engrossed in important social interactions. Amidst these 60 individuals oblivious to the brewing situation, a subtle alteration occurred near the bar. "Miles," Camille spoke, her tone transformed from its usual professional finesse to something raw and exposed. "I didn't intend." "I understand," I replied, acknowledging both her intent and my complicity in the matter. The difficulty lay in that she didn't mean it maliciously. Rather, she saw it as a matter of management. Over time, she'd become so adept at this task that she'd grown oblivious to its cost. "I believe we should have an open discussion," I suggested. "Not tonight, but soon." She nodded thoughtfully, a hint of apprehension reflected in her eyes, though I couldn't immediately identify the source of her fear. Perhaps it was the prop, or the larger item beneath it, or even herself. "All right," she murmured softly. I gave a slight nod before heading off to locate Nora, as there were matters I needed clarity on in 15 years of catching up that wouldn't wait for a suitable moment. The night concluded as evenings like this often do. Warm greetings and handshakes, cars arriving at Wacker Drive, the November chill nipping at those not suitably dressed for the walk to the garage. Nora and I had swapped numbers, signaling our intention to use them genuinely. She had also provided me with a trusted lawyer's name, advising me to scrutinize the original settlement documents. She spoke this suggestion matter-of-factly, professionally, as if addressing a problem that needed resolution. Yet before she departed, she said one more thing. Leaning slightly away for privacy, not dramatically, she whispered, "I want you to be aware that I was sincere. I sought you out not due to work matters or legal issues, but because you were among the few who made the difficult choice rightly when it mattered most, and I wanted you to understand that it mattered greatly." I remained silent initially, unsure of how to express this. However, in time, I found the courage to acknowledge its impact. Recognizing you were still around brought me more comfort than I initially perceived. She glanced at me for a brief moment. "Then, let's ensure we don't drift apart again." "Agreed," I replied. "Let's make sure we don't." The ensuing weeks brought about many changes. For 2 years, my brother Derek had inquired if I was content. Each time, I evaded the question with my customary comforting ambiguity. 2 weeks following our Langham dinner, I called him and for the first time answered truthfully. "No," I admitted. "I haven't been for a while." "I know," Derek replied without any hint of unkindness. He spoke as if relieved, having waited long enough and now finding confirmation. The lawyer Nora advised, a woman named Patricia Greer, centrally based on South LaSalle Street, scrutinized my initial settlement papers and verified Nora's suspicions. The attorney I was initially provided by the firm had been acting in their best interests rather than mine. Money was withheld from me, rights unaware to me existed. Patricia outlined these discrepancies during a meeting spanning 2.5 hours, set against Grant Park's backdrop. Upon finishing, I remained silent for a moment, absorbing the documents before contemplating the years of assumed narrative conclusion. Over November, Camille and I engaged in 3 challenging discussions. These were our most truthful conversations in years, perhaps ever. What emerged from these talks was this. We had been presenting versions of ourselves that were less than genuine for each other and the world's eyes. Camille encapsulated her personal past according to her aspirations, while I did the same. Our respective histories had never been disclosed to each other. We were more connected as cohabitants, social partners, and mutual idealistic spouses than as actual individuals. We chose to part ways. The separation wasn't dramatic. No champagne was thrown, although I contemplated the impact of a broken glass against the marble floor at the Langham, seeing it as a sort of punctuation mark, symbolizing the conclusion of a narrative. Camille retained the Lincoln Park residence. I relocated to a 3rd-floor apartment on North Milwaukee Avenue in Wicker Park, which received morning sunlight through its windows, had audible neighbors, and offered a tranquility that felt deserved rather than suffocating. My left-side neighbor was a retired teacher named Howard who worked irregular hours and occasionally dropped by to share excess food he'd prepared. On my right sat Priya, a young medical resident who occasionally requested me to check for deliveries. I prepared my own meals and rested when fatigued. My mornings were spent working on a project Nora had assigned me, a consulting role concerning the structural evaluation of 3 aged commercial properties our firm was considering purchasing in South Loop. This was genuine work, demanding effort yet offering rewards. On Sunday mornings, Derek phoned. I responded, "There's something about discovering that your story doesn't end as you once believed it would." For 12 years, I had lived as though the most significant chapters were over, as if the appropriate reaction to what had transpired was to seal it off, to occupy less space, to mold myself into something capable of existing in any room without requiring too much from that room. The evening at the Langham had tugged at a thread I wasn't aware was still connected to anything. Nora and I caught up over coffee one Tuesday in early December at a West Randolph Street establishment she favored, a place that had stood its ground for years without boasting. We conversed for 3 hours, discussing our achievements and losses over the span of 15 years. Nora never wed. Her daughter, now 20, an architecture student at UIC, was the subject of her contentment, solid and self-sufficient. Her pride didn't crave validation. She expanded her company from a shared workspace in Milwaukee to multiple offices across 5 cities. She achieved this by recognizing something she had learned the hard way, that nothing enduring can be constructed on an untruthful foundation, not buildings, not businesses, nor lives. She remarked, clutching her coffee mug, "What constantly crosses my mind is the amount of effort expended in sustaining a deceptive image. Our previous company invested more energy in controlling public perception than in actual engineering work. In the end, it crumbled because authenticity is crucial for load-bearing structures. I called it a structural metaphor." She nodded and said, "We are structural engineers." Exactly, we possess the language of forces, weight distribution, and resistance under pressure, elements that have eluded me while I pretended not to be an engineer for 12 years. By January, I had joined Ashford Meridian Group as a full consultant. Title of mine, which occasionally felt unusual when spoken, became Director of Structural Evaluation, a novel position designed by Nora due to her dissatisfaction with colleagues not grasping the contrast between a building's appearance and its structural capabilities. Camille, being a regional vice president, maintained a professional demeanor at our professional crossroads. As a consultant, I was and she was. Our interactions were polite and practical, reflecting the cautious approach adults adopt when they acknowledge that the past is past and the future requires careful navigation. A renegotiation of my initial settlement occurred following Patricia Greer's evaluation, resulting in mediation. The specific figure isn't significant. What counts is that what I perceived as a closed opportunity turned out to be an opportunity that had merely been temporarily obstructed while I was still involved. On a Thursday night in February, Howard from next door overcooked chili and knocked on my door. For 2 hours, we delved into his 3 decades in the Chicago public school system, discussing former students and the significance of meaningful labor, as well as the uncertainty over whether one can truly discern its impact during the act itself. I admitted to him that I was gradually uncovering my path. After hearing about my relocation, Mrs. Ackhaffer from Lincoln Park texted me. My brother had informed her, for Derek shares information, which is one of his better traits. She wrote, "Miles, wherever you are this summer, remember those who observe you." I hadn't overlooked them. Now here are some insights I gained in the past year that previously eluded me. Abandonment is a decision that feels like self-preservation, but acts as a gradual downfall. People who attempt to render you invisible often harbor their own fear of visibility. Carrying something for 15 years alone is not too long to lay it aside. I am aware that the truth I disclosed in a now-demolished conference room, as detailed in a structural report, had spread beyond my expectations, accomplishing more than I was granted to observe, making its way through Nora Callahan, a judge's ruling, and numerous lawsuits I wasn't involved in into something substantial. I recognized that Nora Callahan entered the Langham Hotel on a Friday evening in October and sought me out, and when she said, "I never cease searching for you," she meant it in multiple ways. I am aware that the sound of a champagne glass shattering on marble floor is not easily forgotten, and I know that some conclusions are the most resonant part of an arrival unforeseen. My name is Miles DeVero. At 47, I am a structural engineer, still learning what I can grasp. What intrigues me about Miles's narrative, he was not frail. Someone molded him into a silent individual for their own gain, yet this aspect remains unspoken, how those near us can gradually diminish us, and we acquiesce, labeling it love. However, I encourage you to grasp the essence of tonight's message. The truth you shared years ago, the honorable act you performed despite the heavy cost, doesn't fade away. It journeys, eventually returning to you. Miles inscribed his name on papers and departed, believing his tale was complete. But no, it wasn't then, nor is yours now.